Welcome to Rip to Shreds, and today we're going to rip Hellboy, the Crooked Man, to shreds. To start off, Josiah and Rick, I believe, have brought some trivia to the table. What is the first fact of trivia for this film that we want to talk about?
Well,
Go ahead.
I think I'll just give some basic facts, and then Rick will say stuff that's interesting. So the basic facts about this one is that this is the fourth adaptation, the second reboot, adapting Mike Mignola's Hellboy comic series, which I have read through the main line. It's fantastic.
Is that how you pronounce his last name? Mignola?
Mignola? I think so. I don't think it's Mignola. I think it's Mignola. But that doesn't matter.
It sounds way more correct than what I pictured in my mind.
Yeah. That's like Gaspar Noé, when it's really just like Gaspar Noé, like the filmmaker. Anyway, so it sounds fancier. But, adapting his comic, and this is the one that he's been credited as a co-writer of the script. It is his favorite adaptation of Hellboy, which, we will discuss later. And, he did receive a story credit for Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, which came out in 2008, but he wasn't really as responsible as he was for this one, which this one is, I'm not going to say it's like a direct one-for-one adaptation. They pull some stuff from other stories. They do some interesting things in the third act that are a bit different. But overall, this is the closest adaptation of a Hellboy story we have received, aside from one of the Hellboy animated films, which is Blood and Iron. So technically, this is actually not the fourth adaptation, if you count those animated ones. So
how many animated ones are there? Are there like two, or
there's two?
Is it just the two? Okay.
Mm-hmm. They were gonna do a third one, and similar to the Del Toro movies, we never got a complete Hellboy trilogy. We've never been able to reach 3.
Damn.
We've been trying to.
We've only reached 2 once.
Yes. We've reached 2 and 2, and then had 2 reboots. So it seems 2 is the cursed number.
Yeah.
This is also the shortest at 1 hour and 39 minutes, and you can feel that for sure. And this is also noteworthy. One more thing is that this Hellboy movie didn't release in theaters here. They shot it in Bulgaria. They released it in some European territories and some Asian territories, the UK and Canada, but they chose not to release it here in theaters and put it straight onto VOD. $20, and then you'll be able to get it for $6. I think the end of the month.
And I do believe in December it's going to Apple, right? The streaming wise.
I believe so.
If you're trying to catch it on an official streaming platform, Apple is where it's going to land eventually.
And best I can tell, not being in the room where it happens, I think that the international market was not giving them very good box office, and so they decided to cut their losses. They essentially charge like $16 for a movie ticket, but why not just take the full amount and not have to give any profit to the theater, and just have people pay $20 for the first 2 weeks and then $6 after? It makes a certain amount of sense. So I was day one, I bought the movie and watched it. But that's all the basic stuff for me. Rick, please, I would like you to take point now to give us some.
Some of the trivia I have is, not really about the movie itself, but the movie was directed by Brian Taylor, who also directed the Crank films.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell in some of the parts they had like some kind of like crazy weird editing, that is almost reminiscent of like the Crank films.
Yeah.
Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Very, very Spirit of Vengeance vibe, like at certain points, that's for sure.
It's like I liked some of the choices. I feel like the editing in the beginning, he took a little bit more, or the editor took a little bit more risks with the editing, with the whole, pinhole edit and then back. Almost felt like editing of the time of the 50s of what was supposed to go on.
Yeah.
Another thing that I thought was interesting that might not be interesting to you, but I grew up with the show that the Reverend was the butler Jeffrey from Fresh Prince.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yup.
okay. I knew I recognized him from somewhere. That's crazy to me. Okay.
Yeah. So
Good choice.
I thought that was a pretty cool thing because the minute I was watching it, I'm like, wait, is that Jeffrey? Or am I just being ultra racist right now and assuming all older black men will all look alike?
Yeah.
So I stopped the film and I looked it up. I'm like, oh, okay. It is him.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like he was one of the best parts of the film.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah, I thought his acting was very, very strong.
Mhm.
And then Jack Kesy is the youngest Hellboy out of the bunch,
Bum, bum,
Right.
bum.
which is almost right for the part because he's technically playing the youngest version of Hellboy that we've
Yeah.
seen.
And now, because of him, there has officially been a Hellboy Deadpool crossover.
Yeah.
He was in Hellboy 2. Not Hellboy
Hellboy
2.
2?
He was in Deadpool 2 and was in the prison and then gets shot in the face in a comedic way.
Yeah.
When Deadpool and what's his face?
Yeah, that's right.
The guy from Goonies are fighting.
Casey was
Oh.
Black Tom Cassidy, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's just like the prison bully, and then he just gets shot in the face randomly, and Deadpool cries
Yeah.
about it.
And the last bit of trivia is this is the only Hellboy of the live action ones where it's not involving something world ending. It's all
Mhm.
consolidated to one small little town,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was interesting because I almost felt like they should have started with this type of story for Hellboy and built
Right.
up to the world ending stories because it almost feels like that I think this is where a lot of film is getting a lot of flack because it's a very small contained story and not something big like we've expected from Hellboy where cities are burning and
But I
fantasy elves are trying to
Yeah.
steal crowns to take over a golden army that's undefeatable.
Always trying to take it straight to the apocalypse.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing I liked about this film is because it
Same.
gave a little bit more of a grounded story that it didn't feel like, there was a lot of stakes and it made Hellboy feel very, very vulnerable. Even though, we know he's going to come up on top no matter what.
Yeah.
But,
Hellboy's a
definitely the
dog.
right move. Definitely the right move after the bombast of the 2019 film, which goes very it's very extreme in its tone.
but what I read from about the 2019 film is part of it is Del Toro's original idea for the third and final sequel of his trilogy. So what they were trying to do, I think, was play both sides of the fence and it didn't work out.
They also tried to condense. So I have the volumes. So real quick, I won't go too far, but they tried to condense the longest story arc in Hellboy into at the time the shortest movie.
Was it the sword and the storm?
Yeah, so they condensed the Nimue stuff, the Arthur stuff, the Fae stuff, the giant stuff. All that is the longest volume in Hellboy history, and they tried to condense all of that, and it didn't really work in my opinion. But
And then they also throw in Baba Yaga and then the pig guy and just it's just too much, too many side quests. And then,
yeah, they were. The last movie was trying to be more faithful to the source material, but in a way of a macro way. This was trying this story, The Crooked Man. They took like one of the short stories, because the Hellboy is a combination of two things. Is that he goes on all these like short adventures in like the earlier decades, like the 40s, late 40s through the 80s. And then in the 90s, is when he gets these revelations about his past, and he runs into Rasputin, and then the real world-ending stuff starts to occur because they're getting closer to the apocalypse. So this film chose to take one of those beloved short stories and adapt it. So.
Which I think is a very smart idea, like I said, because we were able to see a little bit of his character and a little bit of him like coming into the mantle of Hellboy, or whatever we want to call it. It's not really a mantle because he is Hellboy. We got to see like a little bit of stuff with his mom, which we saw in the 2019. But to me, it felt like it was more of like hints instead of full blown exposition in your face to just tell you that he's King Arthur's
yes
relative.
He's descended from Mordred's bastard's daughter's great granddaughter. You know, like they had to like they had to like, and when you watch, and the funny, you know, I've read it, so it's now in hindsight it's even funnier because like in the movie it like you're just so confused, like this comes out of nowhere, but in the comic it's so like slowly built up that you buy like, oh, Hellboy is a King Arthur descendant. Okay, we're going with it. But in this movie, yeah, he arrived on our planet in 1945, and then the film takes place in 1958. So he's a young man, like he's a very young man at this point.
Ooh. Yeah, is there anything as far as Hellboy's aging? Like, how does he age like normal, like humans, but then it still has a longer life, or like what's the deal?
I think he's at least half the age. Like he ages at half the rate at least.
I think they say that his body, he grows at like a normal pace, but he's mentally still like a child.
Mm-hmm.
So his body matures
faster than his mind.
Okay, so as far as the whole half rate thing, is it like a 10-year-old Hellboy looks like a 20-year-old man?
I think so, because he essentially in this story he would be 13. Well, he's not like a newborn when he arrives on the planet. But if we were to put him in human years, he would only be like maybe, I don't know, 18 during the events of the story. And part of the thing if the young Hellboy is that if we're kind of putting this in context of the later iterations like the Perlman stuff, he's in his edgier, more angsty teenage phase in this film. And it was just, in my opinion, I thought Jack did a pretty decent job in the role. Yes. Like he was more serious, he was more subdued, but I thought that he pulled it off pretty well.
Yeah. To me, he acted more of like a mature Hellboy, know,
that is,
and more with like dry, quips, if anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It wasn't yucks. It was dry humor.
But I have another form of trivia before we move on. But this is unconfirmed trivia. This may be just from my own mind. So I believe Jack Kesy has developed lung cancer for how many cigarettes he smoked on camera. It was ridiculous amount. I swear, every new scene, every new cut to Hellboy,
there was a scene where he went through like 7 cigarettes.
Yeah.
In like 5 minutes. It was insane.
And so I was thinking, since it's a small budget movie and they probably didn't film for too long, every cut, every take that they had, they probably had him sparking up a new cigarette.
Yeah.
And those were the shots that worked. And so that's what we got. Which is hilarious.
$20 million budget, half of which went to their cigarette budget.
So, I made a joke, and I'll reference the famous production, the not famous production. In my Letterboxd review for this film, I said in the opening line, this movie is competing with Joker, Folie à Deux, and Omnibus for what is the most amount of cigarettes smoked in a single film.
Yes, that's fair.
Because I heard the same. I haven't seen Joker, Folie à Deux yet, but I heard he's spawning cigarettes out of nowhere all the time. So
there is a lot of cigarettes in it. This is true. But it's like he's constantly like asking the guards for cigarettes. Like it's a whole thing of like they have him make a joke and then he gets a cigarette.
Right.
So
interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah. So how does this movie compare to the other Hellboys? I think it's good to talk about the Hellboys themselves and then the actual stories and everything. Of course, I think Ron Perlman, Guillermo del Toro movies are still top dog. For me, the Golden Army is the best one, even though the first Hellboy still comes in a very close second. I just love those ones. And then the 2019 one is right at the bottom, and so that makes Crooked Man the third best Hellboy film. What's funny is I don't dislike any of the Hellboys. I think like David Harbour actually did a really good job. He just had really bad writing to work with. And then
he got done dirty in some ways. Like he was perfect casting. No one, I will never debate that.
Yeah, I really liked Ian McShane too as Broom.
Yeah, that was a good choice as well.
I thought he was this awesome choice, of being like that hard nails, tough dad on him, but he knew he had to be tough to kind of like move him in the right direction because of what his prophecy is.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate that the Crooked Man did not just rehash his origin once again. So that's good.
For once they went to his mom.
Yeah, they did go into his origin, but a different facet that hadn't really been
exactly a new angle
in the film.
So something that I was actually interested in when they were telling it. And then, but yeah, no, my initial reaction to like the trailers was like, the movie doesn't look bad, but I don't know about that Hellboy makeup. It just he looked, the jaw, the Hellboy's known for his jaw. His comic books, the cartoons, giant jaw. And then they made sure to add like jaw prosthetics to the other Hellboys, and Ron Perlman just has a big mouth. So he's perfect for Hellboy. He literally, like, facial structure perfect. And then this one, they didn't add like any jaw prosthetic, and he's just freeballing it.
Yeah.
And so my initial reaction was like, oh God, he looks bad. But honestly, it grew on me. I think I'm by the end, by like actually watching this film, I was accepting. I fully accepted the way he looked. I heard people complaining about his tail. I never had any complaints about his tail. I didn't notice anything. Maybe it was just something I missed.
So I would rather not notice it than notice it and have it look bad.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I would say,
But
to me, the jaw thing didn't bother me because I felt like maybe he's portraying a younger Hellboy, so he's growing into his features.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, fine, I'll accept it. And then I did accept it by the time I was actually watching the movie, so that's good. But yeah, the movie itself, though, a lot of stuff I really liked. Decent amount of stuff that was a little rough.
Specifically for me, the beginning, I did not like.
Okay, yeah. So
the setup to get them into Appalachia, they could have just had them start there, but the setup was absurd.
Everything about the spider, stupid, stupid.
I found something interesting is that Bobby Joe Song, who's the other original element to the movie, cancels out the spider. So they had the two original elements of the movie cancel each other out, which was either lazy or genius.
How do they end up in the town in the in the comic book?
Well, she's not there. It's just Hellboy and Tom.
I thought I thought there was a agent. It's just Hellboy.
No,
okay.
No, it's just Hellboy wandering around, and literally the story starts with him walking with Tom.
Okay.
So this movie, they had this original character, and they had to figure out they wanted a way to kind of make her important, and then get them into the story, and so they're transporting this cargo.
So
yeah,
is there a stranded element to it in the comic book? I thought there was. Okay.
No, he's literally just
he's just actually investigating what's going on.
Yeah, he's literally just going through, and then he's like from what I remember, he's in a nearby town, and he hears something weird's kind of going on, and then he bumps into Tom, and then they're just like the partners for the journey.
So then
of course they meet the Reverend and everything, but
then I imagine that means the line that he has in the film about like dark things call out to dark things or whatever.
Yeah.
That was an original writing, that wasn't
Yes.
in the comic book. So I'll give them
Correct.
props for that. I think that was a pretty good line right there. But yeah, the spider, oh man, it was a rough start to the film.
The CG was never rougher than it was in the bright daylight with that spider. It was. I don't usually like to get on special effects, but that was just not the best foot forward at the beginning of your movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. Even but the thing was, the worst part was when the spider attacks the other agent that they're with and explodes his head, and it just looks so bad. That was like, oh no.
Yeah.
What am I in for?
So there was some stink about this movie, some slight stink, because obviously we live in an age where there's a lot of speculation, a lot of interrogation, justifiably so, I would say, about AI usage. I know Late Night with the Devil got in some controversy about that, as far as I understand it. But this movie, apparently the producer missaid that they use AI to enhance some effects in this movie, and then Brian Taylor had to come out and say, well, he was referring to a different film in their catalog. Everything in Hellboy is either practical or does not use AI. But there was definitely some clipping with that spider. There was a bit where it jumped at Hellboy and its leg almost clipped in front of him and then went kind of back behind him, I'm sorry, it just didn't look good. Later when the spider's in the cavern, it's in darkness, so it looks better. They can hide it a bit more, but yeah, that opening, I don't know why they didn't just set it at night. You could have just altered the story so they're on a train at night. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. The one aspect about the spider is when it shrinks down. I thought that was it was kind of neat. I'll take that. That was the one thing I liked about the spider. But yeah, so it was just funny because obviously the movie not doing well overseas, so then they just put it straight to VOD. It's not getting good ratings. Oh crap, we're in for a bad Hellboy movie once again. And then it has that intro, and I was like, the hope that I was holding out for, I was like, oh no. And then, but it only kind of went up from there.
Right.
Which isn't, going up from there isn't too hard if we're being honest. But it did keep going up, which was good.
I did notice that Rick, I monitored your Letterboxd, so you rated and obviously it's a rating, it's not an exact science or anything, nobody's claiming it is, but I did notice you gave 2.5-star rating to this and 2019, so they have the same rating as far as your...
Wait. This is also an important fact. Did you just watch the 2019 one for the first time?
Yeah.
So you watch... Okay, give me the order. How recent did you watch both of these movies?
A day apart.
Okay, and you just watched the Crooked Man today, right?
I finished it this morning. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if you gave them the same rating, how do you think they compare?
Yeah, we haven't heard much from you on that, Rick.
So, Perlman movies, I agree. 1A, 1B.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a big noticeable step down. So, these are 3A, 3B. Because there is some good stuff in the 2019 one with a dark fantasy and the more horror approach, which, I really liked. And I liked, some of the actors. I felt Harbor was as close to Perlman as you can get. If they chose anybody else, I don't think they can get that close to Perlman.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not.
His Hellboy was great. Ian McShane as Broom, great. Just didn't have much to work with because he just played that disgruntled old dude. But I'm an Ian McShane fan, so he gets a little extra, kudo points for me every time he's on screen because I love him. No homo. But between the two different stories, I feel like they both could have been something good, but I feel like there's a lot of interference on the studio's part on both. Which, if you watch some of the deleted scenes in the original or Hellboy 2019, you can see that they wanted the Blood Queen to be more of a neutral character that got betrayed by Arthur.
Right.
She was supposed to, be given a truce so that way the dark monsters and the humans could live in peace together. Almost kind of, the Golden Army elves, the magical realm, and the humans could live together type of deal. But Arthur betrayed her, and then we got our story. So they cut out a big part of dialogue of her being like upset about what happened. So with that in mind, after seeing that, I was like, okay, that makes sense of what they were trying to do with the movie. Some of the writing, some of the edits and stuff were just bad. I felt like they would just like cut in the middle of the scene into something that, was cut for time, or cut because they had to cut it because there was probably old references to things that weren't in the movie anymore. So I give 2019 a lot of credit for going in a different direction of what Guillermo del Toro was going, but still keeping the fantasy aspect of the film and trying to keep it enough to where possibly these fans that watch the first two movies where we see high fantasy whimsicalness could, fall in love with this dark fantasy horror, but still get that fantasy aspect of what they were looking for a Hellboy movie. Whereas, 2000 or the new one, Crooked Man, I liked how, like I said, I loved how it was a grounded story. It was a fresh take on Hellboy. It was something new. But I feel like the first three films ruined what this film could be for me, in the way of that stories are supposed to have natural evolution, and we got a de-evolution on this story. We got Hellboy basically on possibly one of his first adventures, and we're used to seeing Hellboy take on world-ending monsters and huge giants, elves, that have magical powers, a golden army that doesn't die, but yet he's fighting basically a witch. And I don't know how to categorize the Crooked Man. He's pretty much a demon witch himself, right?
Yeah.
And I, for myself, never felt like Hellboy was in much of danger sometimes, because I'm like, oh, I've seen him take out huge giants. I've seen him take out demons. I've seen him as, the demon king that he's supposed to be, take out swarms of monsters or swarms of humans, and then, kill this blood witch who's, supposedly undefeatable because she's can't be killed. But then we see him fight the Crooked Man, and he's having a hard time, and I just couldn't believe it. But that's part of when I, got back in the pocket of the movie, and I'm like, okay, we're seeing an original take. We're seeing him from the beginning. He hasn't got all that expertise in fighting probably monsters at that point. So he's struggling against something that's a smaller threat, but it's something that's a big threat for him in this context of the story. And so,
yeah,
that's where I kind of rate them pretty much the same. I think the movie is highly, highly, highly underrated because it's getting shitted on for no damn reason.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that I'm not going to say this is like a hidden gem, or like or that it's necessarily going to be a cult classic, but I do think that it's going to take a while for people to kind of realize that at worst the movie is harmless.
Yeah.
I quite like elements of it. If I had my perfect adaptation of it, I would want this done by A24, and I would want it to be like 20-30 minutes longer and really do like stretch out the pacing of like them going cut the spider, make it all about like this weird essentially put Hellboy in the Vivitch by Robert Eggers. Like that would be my perfect, if we could capture that aesthetic and that tone and that score and that cinematography. be fantastic. But since we don't have that, it's kind of like a Xerox copy of an A24 horror movie where there's certain things, like there's certain bits that I think are quite effective, like the familiar, the raccoon going back into the skin of Cora. I thought was a great scene, fantastic scene. Like if the whole movie was on the level of that scene in terms of the ick creep factor. Crooked Man, he's somewhat effective at first. I don't think he carries that menace for very long, but that's kind of the point. He's a miser, he's a pathetic character, but they don't even do the ending in the comic. They literally just like shoot him in the head and like the coin. And I do like the coins exploding out of him, but they definitely. I think that's also part of it. Is I think maybe to your point, Rick, is maybe this would feel less jarring as like a threat if the Crooked Man was. And I think the actor did a great job. I truly believe it's the filmmaking. I think the Crooked Man just. When you have Hellboy's like father to the specter of Hellboy's demon father there, it also is like, well, that seems like it's more the big threat. Like that's the, and that's just how the story's laid out. Again, like it's not supposed to be like the greatest threat of all time. Because here's the thing is, I think a big issue with this movie, and I don't think she was bad, but adding in this original character. So we have this agent perspective. In the original comic, Tom is the main character. He's the one narrating. He's the one kind of driving the action. And Hellboy is there kind of helping him get the courage to stand against the Crooked Man.
Yeah.
By adding in Bobby, you kind of ruin that focus and that POV. And now if Tom is the main character, he should be scared of the Crooked Man. But since we want to give more limelight to Hellboy, and we have this Bobby Joe character, it feels as if, like there was never too much danger. Like she's an original character. Maybe the spider could have gotten her, but I don't think any of us believed that necessarily.
Yeah. And I think with having Joe as a character, I felt like it was kind of having double the idea of what you were trying to say with the character with what Tom's, story development is that, magic, the intention is what is the witch, or what the witch magic is the intention. The other characters had bad intention for it, so they went to hell. But Tom and Joe had good intention, and so they had good magic.
Yeah.
And by having Joe basically have the same character arc as Tom, almost exactly straight to the point, it's like, why are we doing this twice? When
What?
we could have had Hellboy maybe be on one of his drunken stupors, and then he somehow waddles into this town.
Yeah.
And I almost felt like that was like a big misstep, that they could have had the town to be another character.
Yeah.
Of being under the Crooked Man's thumb the whole time. They kind of had a small little bit with at the church with everybody outside, but it was a big like atmospheric decision that they missed.
That was the thing, is they actually cut a bunch of the stuff in the comics setting up all the undead witches and all the witches coming from around the town. Like they cut all that and they just show up at the church, and it was kind of a weird decision because I thought you have all these horror potential, these scenes for potential horror, and you kind of just cut them out of your horror movie.
I also think that's just like the problem with having this director that's used to having this kinetic style of filmmaking that he uses for his Crank, Ghost Rider, and his other movies are very kinetic. They're always quick moving, always on to the next scene, and I feel like that was the flaw of this movie. It's like nothing kind of like sat and made you feel that tension and that dread.
Yeah.
And I felt like him walking through town, or maybe the detective aspect of him and Tom maybe going from like person's house to person's house, like trying to find his dad or Cora. That could have been a good atmospheric story that we just missed out on.
And the thing is this is the case in the comics too. Something that people who only know the Perlman movies, in those movies they changed it where Hellboy is a secret. It's a very classic. There's the BPRD is a secret organization. We can't show ourselves, and that's a big thing in the second movie, especially. That is not the case in the comics. That is not the case in this movie. And I don't think in 2019 either, but that was a bit weirder.
Yeah.
But the benefit of the comics and what this movie could have done is like people like know who Hellboy is, so you can go like have him asking people questions, and you don't need the exposition every time of, oh, this is Hellboy. Like they kind of know who he is, so you can immediately jump into those conversations and cut to them, and you don't need to explain why this person isn't weirded out by it.
Yeah,
so
we had that whole idea of that lady going, "Oh, I saw you in Life magazine."
Mm-hmm.
You know, that kind of showed already. Oh, these people know about him.
Yeah.
And 2019, you know, had that scene of him supposedly drinking in Mexico, sad for killing Ruiz for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And Broom was like, "You've been gone for 3 weeks. What have you been, you know, drinking?" You know, I feel like they could have had like a scene like that where he like stumbles into this town if they wanted to just, you know, have him like stumble into it like how he did with the whole spider and everything. Why doesn't he stumble into town being, you know, mischievous, where his character's like young and doesn't know what he's doing, you know?
He's purposely slipped away from a BPRD containment and he's wandering around or something. I don't know.
Exactly. Because, you know, that's what I get from the character, that he's like always trying to like get away and have his like own like time. Especially with I think it was number 2, he slipped away for a bit. The third one he slips away for a bit.
I mean, the first one as well, when he's stalking Liz and Myers.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And
I feel like that's like almost a part of his character, is him slipping away, trying to get away and, you know, enjoy the world, enjoy life, because he's basically relegated to this, you know, detective, this guy that goes out and takes care of these monsters or these like, you know, spiritual things, and then he's back to, you know, the facility, and he's stuck there.
Yeah.
Because he's basically a young teenager, and he's learning from humans too. Is like he's like a human. He's curious at that age. Why isn't he doing any of this stuff? Mm-hmm. At least in this adaptation.
Yeah. So as far as the Crooked Man, I have one blaring question. What is the point of a witch ball? What are you supposed to do with it?
This is one of those things in the movies where the pacing was so accelerated. They literally adapt the scene. So in the comic, there's literally a scene where it's the same as the movie. The witch is looking right at the reader and explaining, this is how you make a witch ball. But they transposed that into the film, and I loved that they did that. But the thing is that you have so little time with that child who has been infected by the witch ball. And the witch ball is never really... Well, it comes back at the end with... Doesn't Tom throw one in the Crooked Man's mouth?
Yeah, he throws one in.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then it's like, that doesn't...
Thank God for baseball.
That doesn't really tell me, like, what does a witch ball do? Like...
Yeah, they don't use a witch ball on the Crooked
Man. Is it for,
Man.
like, possession? Is that the purpose of a witch ball?
Yeah, kinda.
Like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like ultimately, like, any issues that I have with the film comes down to, I love the source material. I do not like the director. I think that's what it actually comes down to. I think the Crank movies are a mess and they're not good. I think Ghost Rider was a mess and was not good. Gamer is a mess and is not good. But then all of these movies have some elements that are kind of cool. And especially like Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. Set design, I suppose. I don't know, maybe not set design is the word to use, but like Ghost Rider, his makeup, his appearance, his costuming, everything about Ghost Rider is super cool. Like, it looks good. But that movie is just I would probably hate it even more if I watched it again. It is
there's one scene in that I really love, which is Nick Cage talking about the scraping at the door as he's going insane. That scene is really good.
Fair.
No, you got it. The best scene is when he's peeing and shooting out fire and talking to the kid about it.
That's right. I forgot about that.
That is the best scene in the whole movie.
But yeah, so it's just like the director can't help himself but to, with his TikTok brain, just make everything have Subway Surfer just playing at the side while we're getting through it. You know, he's just like, oh, this is too boring. We need to cut through. We need to speed it up. We're gonna lose the audience's attention. You know, it feels like it's made by someone with like ADHD or something. Like, it's
you know where Brian Taylor and Neville Dean got their start, though, right?
Where?
Music videos?
Nope. You guys don't know?
I don't actually.
So Neville Dean and Taylor, the original directors of Crank, they're a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
They were X Game cameramen, and they would fly around in roller skates and film all the X Game stuff. Gotcha. That's how they got their start.
Well, that's how
they shot Crank and Crank 2. They had their handheld cameras and they would follow everything on the roller skates. That's why I was always so kinetic and always moving. So I think with this is almost like a traditional, production. I feel like that he was a little bit out of his element and really didn't know how to shoot a traditional film.
Yeah. This to say, in my opinion, I think of the movies we've listed, Crank. I don't even remember if I finished Crank 2. Crank, Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance, Gamer. I'd say maybe this is his best film out of those.
I would say so. But then once again, I'm not sure how much credit I can give towards him for that. Right. Because it's the source material. Because ultimately, the thing is like, if you're a fan of the other Hellboy movies, but you're not necessarily big on like folk horror, you probably won't like this movie. I think being a fan of folk horror is the thing that kept me engaged with the movie itself. If I was not already into this type of stuff, I would have probably been checked out with the movie.
I think that's the thing, is that what we're looking at is when you look at a series that has different creatives coming on board, different genres, different continuities. Ultimately, it's a different director. It's a different vision. And the thing is that I think a lot of the people who love Hellboy, yes, they like Hellboy, but, it's kind of a fact. A lot of those people who love the first two Hellboy movies haven't read the comics. Mm-hmm. And they may respect the comics and they may like the idea of the comics, but a lot of them, like Rick, Brandon, they love those first two movies. And I think part of that is because it is the vision of Guillermo del Toro. It's because he's a master filmmaker and he's creating this world, and he sells you on this concept that it doesn't matter if it's adapting a great comic book. If a different director took it that wasn't as good, a lot of people wouldn't be as big of fans as Hellboy 1 and 2. So the thing is that even though this is a direct adaptation of the same source material, what we're looking at is, no offense to Brian Taylor, but he's not Guillermo del Toro. And so, if a Robert Eggers was directing this, you'd have the buy-in of the clout and the mastery that Robert Eggers has to bring people in. But because a lot of people watching this movie, if they're already fans of Hellboy, then they're going to see the movie anyway, because they've read the comic, and the comic has a uniform style because it's all crafted essentially by one man. But this isn't Del Toro. This is a new take. And so the buy-in is less because it's purely the concept of Hellboy and a character that these film watchers are familiar with, but they're not familiar with this genre with Hellboy. Like there was a different tone and genre between Hellboy 1 and Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, but it was united by the cast and by Del Toro. Yeah. And I think that's what you're probably getting at, is that if you don't like folk horror and you're not in love with you like the concept of Hellboy, but you like this other version of Hellboy, it's very difficult to get people to buy in.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. Because it's like I was enjoying all the Hellboy stuff. But I was really loving all the folk horror stuff. Any scene that that Effie is in, great, super good. So gotta give credit to everybody involved with those elements. But then you just
I think Effie is almost like one of the best parts of the movie, because
absolutely
she has the most solid arc. She's literally the last shot of the movie. And that's the same. That is straight out of the comics. The last panel is the horse that says "Beware, I am a witch," which just a wonderful ending to a story. But the fact that they kept that was a very strong decision, because the actress just tore it up. She ate the scenery in the best possible way. I loved it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, then one of the other negatives I felt that like just simply because of how slowly the scene happened, I felt negatively towards it was when the Crook Man starts stabbing Hellboy with all the fence posts. I'm not opposed to the idea of that scene at all. It just happens so slowly, and Hellboy's like, ah. It's like he's just kind of taking it.
In the comic, he just throws them all at once.
Exactly, and that's the way it should have been because, like, yeah, what are you gonna do to that? You know, so if that happened like that, I would have accepted it, but because it's like, ow, like, what are you doing? Ow! He's just like slowly walking away. That kind of took me out of it for a little bit, but the rest of like the church scene was like 2 thumbs up. Like, it was good. I do wish the zombie killing had a little more flair to it. I think you could kind of see the budget there, especially like
surprisingly bloodless.
Yeah, and the use of his like big hand, like he just kind of punches some zombies with it. It's like, oh, come on.
They kept the right hand of doom being in combat to a minimum. I counted it was like maybe 3 times. Like it was
exactly, which also like bums me out that it's like, why were their heads not exploding when he used it? You know, so it's like the minimal use of it is fine, as long as it's a big impact when he does use it. And they didn't really do that. I mean, he crushed the snake's head. The also that snake, I feel like, kind of beat him up a little too much before he killed it.
I liked it in the trailer where he just grabbed it and then squished it. Like the fact that he struggled with it for a bit was...
Yeah, I'm okay with one little struggle sesh. It gets a bite on you. You're like, oh, what the hell? You underestimated it, and then you crush it. And
well, it's because they had to have him get knocked out.
Yeah. And like I'm fine with that. The whole like he gets bit and then he goes into like this little ethereal world. Cool. Love that. But why was the snake just absolutely beating his ass? Like, I felt like Hellboy just got his ass beat a little too much in this. Just a little too much. Which, like, I'm a fan of main characters getting being on the losing end, but just like at least be on the losing end in style. He just kind of looked like a dork at certain points. But yeah, big fan of like literally all the witch stuff, honestly. Very, very interesting. Especially, the scene with the raccoon and all that. Incredible. Very good scene. I was super into that scene.
What did you guys think of the Vision Quest, like the House of Illusions they added at the end with Hellboy almost like killing himself because he's rejecting the part of his nature in his Vision Quest?
I thought that was cool.
You know, he's wanting to kill the demon, but it's him. Himself. What did you guys think of that stuff?
I thought that it was kind of hard to tell at first, and it felt like it was like a low budget take on something that was planned that was bigger. You know, I don't know if in the original comic if it was pretty much the same, but to me at first I was like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's what's going on." He's having this inner battle with himself.
None of that is in the original. They go straight to the Crooked Man's house and find his true form because the version that we see is an illusion.
Yeah. And that's what I was waiting to see after watching your video.
And they didn't do it.
Yeah.
They just had it be him, which was strange. But then again, I was thinking about the spider, and I was like, maybe... Because my original conception when they were talking about, AI enhancements on a monster, allegedly, I was thinking, oh no, do they have like a big... Is he like giant, and they fight a giant crab Crooked Man at the end? Oh no. But they didn't do that. They wisely did not.
See, if you just X'd out the spider... then you would have maybe had a little bit of a budget for doing the Crooked Man ending. And I mean, yeah, the whole ending fight with the Crooked Man was a little lame. I still liked it, but it was just like a little anticlimactic. Like
it was really satisfactory. Like it was.
Yeah, so it's like
I accept this.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I do like the idea of head blown off, blows out a bunch of coins, but also at the same time, it's like, so you're telling me the whole time you just needed to shoot him in the face and you couldn't do that with how much interaction you had up until now?
Because, okay, so again, not to keep referring to the comic, but in the comic, they do the whole thing with the shovel. He hits the Crooked Man's human form. Crooked Man disappears. Then they go to the house and find his real form, and Tom throws the cat bone. It hits the Crooked Man. It sends him down to hell. Now, that makes sense because the cat bone is like the central device of the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
But in the movie, they shoot him in the head and then he dies, and you're like, oh,
so literally
nobody ever shot him in the head. Okay, I guess.
Yeah, so he gets rid of the cat bone.
He does, yeah.
But then
because they make the shovel with it, and then I don't remember.
And then but then in the movie, what's her name, Joe? She ends up with it pretty much, right?
No,
because she use it in the tunnels.
No.
What did she use in the tunnels? I don't remember.
He has a flashlight.
Was that just a flashlight? She had like some kind of magic thing.
No, that was just from her. The power was within her all along.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Tom had the bone on him the whole time. That's how he was able to push Effie out of the.
Yeah. That's right. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
So he just never gets rid of the bone.
The bone was kind of like blessed by the Reverend.
Yeah,
and that's what gave it the holy powers.
He sanctifies the cat bone.
Yeah, but then I think that scene is useless because the whole idea with the cat bone is almost like his dueling nature. If he's gonna have bad intention or good intention with it, because that's the power that he has. And I felt like I said, there's a lot of redundant nature in this film, and it's like, did they use the redundancy to fill out the time a little bit more? Maybe this was a shorter script, and they're like, oh, we need to make this a little bit bigger because we're only hitting 80 minutes or 75 minutes on.
Which is funny because they could have just slowed the whole thing down.
I hate to be cynical. I really don't like it. I've been training it out of myself.
We're ripping to shreds. Where this is cynical time.
I've been leeching my cynicism when it comes to film out of myself, like literally withdrawing blood. I'm trying to be better, but I can't help but feel cynically the only reason Bobby Joe was added to the script is so they could have a witch character, a female character, a witch character who wasn't evil.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can conceive of for why she's in the script, taking some of Tom's thunder, because it's not like a parallel. It's redundant, like you're saying, Rick. It's not as if Tom and Bobby forge a connection.
Yeah.
There's nothing there that, like, I can't help but cynically think that is the reason that she's in.
Which is interesting because that right there, that aspect is the most unoriginal thing that you could possibly do. Because the whole, I'm a good witch. Shut the hell up.
But the thing is that in a way, Tom would be the good witch. It's just
exactly.
But it's the fact that he's a man, I think.
He's a warlock.
Probably.
It's because like, all the characters use magic. The male is the only one that's good.
Yeah, but then at the same time, it's like, but he is not using his magic, until there's certain things that happen, but it's not like that, he is knowing that the magic itself, participating in it, is evil. And so he is reluctant to do anything with it until he's like a little bit like forced to, in a way. But
and his intention's always to protect.
Exactly. And the whole thing is like he knows about witchcraft and everything. So he's like, if I don't actually participate in it, even though I initiated everything when I was a teenager, maybe I can save my soul. So I think like it just kind of feels like there is just some almost like a malicious intent of trying to be like, oh, witchcraft's not bad, guys. Witchcraft's not bad. It's just if you're a bad person, witchcraft is actually good. That's what it feels like,
Because so to be clear, Hellboy has a lot. There's a lot of stories, obviously, in the run of the comic.
Mm-hmm.
So you will get stories where it pretty much says like, honestly, like if you mess with magic, like it's a huge mistake. There are stories that portray it in a good way, but the original Crooked Man story does not have a good witch character, and I want to make that clear. Is that the way it because the power comes from the Crooked Man's deals.
Exactly.
So it's not as if Mike Mignola doesn't have good witch characters or positive magic in his larger narrative. But in this narrative, if you make a deal with the Crooked Man, you're making a deal with a guy who literally gave like weapons and alcohol to Native Americans and was on both sides of the Civil War.
Yeah.
And so to think that, and obviously Bobby Joe doesn't make a deal with the Crooked Man, and that's like the loophole.
Yeah.
But it does seem as if they were trying very hard to go, hey, listen, we're not saying that, because they know a lot of the people who like folk horror or who are the people who cheered at the end of The Witch and weren't horrified. They know that that's like some of the audience they're pitching to. So naturally they might want to smooth that a little bit.
Yeah. They're like, we want this movie to still appeal to TikTok witches.
maybe. I don't know.
So we don't want to call them evil blatantly.
And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe like there was like a very like they thought it would create like a deeper resonance with the parallels with Tom, but I just don't think that the movie pulled it off, and I don't know.
You guys want to hear an opinion I have about Joe?
Yeah.
It may be very, very controversial.
Well,
best part of the movie.
All
right. I feel like Joe is a studio creation to have women relate to a character in the story, because there's no other women to relate to in the story.
What are you talking about? Effie Cobb's
yeah, it's true. Yeah, the original story, all the women characters are literally evil.
Yeah.
So no, that's a good point. Yeah, it's just a matter of like them trying to. I mean, and like this isn't even like a malicious thing to say, like being afraid to alienate their female audience. I understand that, but at the same time, like, just like we're adults. Like, come on.
again, it's a suspicion.
To bring more money in, though. That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
It's a suspicion I have. I genuinely think more women who are gonna want to watch this movie are gonna walk out being more interested and more fascinated by Effie Cobb.
It's true.
Than by Bobby Joe.
Absolutely. I'm more interested. I mean, the whole like. There's some of those scenes I was like, maybe I would make a deal with Effie Cobb.
Yeah, like it's supposed to be like, oh, okay. Like it's, they did a good job like showing like, oh, I get why Tom as a young dumb teenager would fall in and decide to do like some dark magic.
Absolutely. If I was the teenager, I'd be like, what do you want? Okay. Like
And I think like one of the things that before we get off the women, I want to talk about Crooked Man one more time, or get back onto the women. Not like that, but I feel like they kind of like missed like the whole idea with like that the Crooked Man was working on behalf of the devil to collect souls, because his deal with the devil was he had to collect souls for him to gain riches to win back his life back. And I feel like that's something like should have played more into.
Yeah.
It was a cool idea, and I will say the comic doesn't necessarily do the same thing. It's more that the souls are riches in our world.
Yeah.
He has the gold coins, and that's the soul. But in our world, it's currency. But this movie was more saying like, no, he's collecting the souls, and then if he collects them all, then he can get what he had back.
Yeah.
But it's one soul is a penny, so he had such a vast fortune that he's punished by his. Yeah, it's gonna take him forever. So he's always. But they never once brought in like Crooked Man commenting on this or saying like he hates this deal or saying that he actually doesn't mind at all because he likes what he does. Like he enjoys the work,
Because his whole idea is his greed and his nature of his greed is what got him in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Him playing both sides. He doesn't care about anybody else but his riches.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that's another like miss that the story had if they wanted to evolve that from the comics a bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think that the story was condensed even smaller, but they added all this redundancy to it to build it up to the 40-hour and 40-minute mark, which sometimes I'm like, they could have cut like 10-15 minutes off the film and made it a lot stronger narrative.
Yeah, I think if you really think about it, if they cut Bobby Joe
At the beginning scene.
And the beginning scene, they just cut that scene. But the rest of the Bobby Joe stuff in the movie, you could have given 75% of that to Tom and Hellboy interactions, and then cut the rest. Boom. Shorter movie, but a stronger narrative and a better adaptation.
But then, like, as far as like actual, like, on the filmmaker side of things, I'm sure there were scenes in there that they deleted or shortened to shit. Just don't do that, and then you don't even have a shorter movie.
Yeah.
So that's what they should have done from the beginning. But either way, I now have a spooky Southern Belle woman accent fetish. So
I'll work on it for you for the next read along.
No, but that's valid. I guess, yeah. Brandon, if Brandon had a letterbox, you just see Crooked Man rewatched like 5 times in a row. You know,
just like the 5 minutes of screen time that Effie had.
It's like the most replayed moment. It's like
jump ahead to the most replayed. Yeah, in the YouTube video. You know,
exactly.
It's the leg shot where it goes.
Perfect.
So, guys, quick question. So we've seen a fantasy director take on Hellboy. We've seen a horror director's take on Hellboy with Neil Marshall. We've seen an action director's take on Hellboy. I know you've made remarks that you'd like to see Eggers take a stab at it, but I don't think that'd happen because it's not far enough back as a period piece. If Hellboy went back further, maybe he might see something.
He could do some of the prequel stuff. There's not even Hellboy like in the same universe. Yeah. I'm just throwing this out there. Robert Eggers, I'm sending it out. Sir Edward Grey Witchfinder, do that series. Anyway, go ahead.
Part of the BPRD.
Yeah.
Okay.
In some ways. Yeah.
Brandon, who would you like to see take a stab at Hellboy? Because I don't think Mr. Taylor's coming back.
I do think that this individual would be uniquely qualified for it, but at the same time, I think he's uniquely qualified to take a stab at literally anything. And I'm sure it'll be no surprise to hear me say Mike Flanagan. I think that he would do a fantastic job, and I am interested in the next Exorcist film simply because he is the writer and director for the next Exorcist film. And I feel like just anything he touches intrigues me, and I think his dialogue writing is just like so good, and there is just like a certain understanding of creepy bump in the night things that he has that makes him uniquely qualified, you know, because dark things call us dark things.
Dark things called dark things.
Yeah, and he kind of has like a, what's the word I'm looking for? He has like a certain type of horror style that's like a, like almost like community based, you know, with what's it called? Can't think of the TV series.
Midnight Mass.
Yeah.
Hell House,
and so I could see if he was able to take on a story about a town.
Yeah, like
Hellboy.
Yeah, like literally take like Midnight Mass, but then just make it the Crooked Man. That would be so good.
Yeah.
I do think Flanagan's a very safe bet. I think he's kind of like the how my buddy Sal put it is he's the emergency break the glass for the studios. Is like anytime a horror franchise needs like somebody solid who's going to be able to do the farther out fantastical elements of the horror, they just break the glass and that's his number in there and they call it.
Yeah, he's got his finger on like what's the horror pulse of today.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
What about you, Rick? Who would you, knowing not very much about like the storyline of the comics, but
so not knowing much about the comics, but I hear the line the comic straddles is somewhere between 2019 and Crooked Man in terms of the horror fantasy action type stuff. So that's with this in mind, and the way that this character has worked with monsters before, and he's working with monsters in his next film, and you can tell a pretty, good
Guillermo del Toro.
Close. And close, when I say close, you'll see why I say close. He can tell a story about a person dealing with these issues of being a monster or dealing with other monsters. He comes from, multiple successful horror franchises, but him himself is a new director, and he's only done a few films, but each of them have been critically good hits. He's shown that he can work with gore. He can show that he can work with, being a little subtle with everything. Do you guys know who I'm talking about?
No.
Does he sound cool so far?
He sounds pretty cool. Is it? I mean, I could be wrong. Is it Ari Aster?
No.
Okay, because like his last film had a penis monster.
I still need to watch. I still need to watch that film. But the reason why I said you were super close is because Mr. Del Toro is doing a little take on the Dark Universe. This guy's doing a little take on the Dark Universe.
Oh, Lee Wan-el?
Lee Wan-el.
Okay. What's funny is when you were talking, he popped up in my head, not thinking that that's who you were talking about. I was just like, I feel like he could do it. But yeah, I agree.
I haven't seen Upgrade, but from some of the scenes that I've seen from Upgrade,
it's fun.
Thumbs up all around.
I can see some Hellboy stuff. The Invisible Man, I can see some of that tension, Hellboy, if you want to go horror. And then we know he can do, good gore with our, Saw movies if they want to show a little bit more gore side towards like 2019. Go ahead.
And he could team up with James Wan again, and because James Wan's done Aquaman, so they can do like the larger comic books.
Well, there's also like Conjuring and stuff like that.
And then he can be very, very subtle with The Conjuring. So they
already did Crooked Man, so we can't do that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and they did it their version of the Crooked Man, and he was pretty freaky, pretty cool. I think he was one of the highlights of The Conjuring 2.
Yeah.
But I would like to see Lee Wan-el do a take on Hellboy, and I think that it would be something that he might take a stab at it.
That's fair.
With the or a punch at with the good old stone fist.
I am looking forward to his Wolfman.
Yeah.
Invisible Man was great.
Upgrade
was great. If you want to like the Venom films, but you understand that they are simply hot garbage,
but fun.
And not fun because they're hot garbage, but you want to enjoy and have fun with a movie like Venom, but it's not Venom because Venom is hot garbage and not fun, then you should watch Upgrade, because that is like kind of the same idea, but actually executed well.
You can, yeah.
And we know that he's a decent writer because he wrote arguably the best 3 Saw movies, or
Mm-hmm.
2 of the 3, because the second one was a story that they kind of cannibalized and made a Saw movie. We know that I think he wrote both the Conjuring movies with Juan, right?
I don't know, actually.
Let's look it up before I'm called an idiot.
You're an idiot.
Damn, too slow. Too slow. He did not write the Conjuring, the first one.
You are an idiot.
I am an idiot. Did he write the second one? He did not. Was it?
He was.
Am I thinking of Insidious?
You might be thinking of Insidious.
Yes, he wrote the first Insidious.
Okay. Wait, was he the writer for the first Insidious, or
He
did he
was
co-write it?
the writer.
He was. Oh, okay.
And him and Juan wrote one, or I was gonna say 1L, but number 2.
Okay.
And he directed and wrote number 3.
Okay. I didn't care for
So,
number 3.
I did not.
I didn't
see
even
number
see
3.
number 2. And he is also an actor in, I think, the 4th one, the last.
Oh, he's an
Lost
actor.
Key,
He plays
whatever.
Specs in the
Yeah.
first one. I know that.
Okay, yeah, he comes back in one of the later
Yeah.
ones.
I got 2.
Two
I got 2.
directors, or
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's likely that Hellboy is not going to be getting a big budget anytime soon. Obviously, I think like getting a really nice up and coming indie director is probably their best, most realistic bet. But if I had like the 2 people that I think would be the best choices, one of them is he's done franchise films. We've seen him do competent, high quality, great looking movies. He has just started the beginning of a trilogy that is going to be self-contained, but uniformly his vision. I think if you were to get someone big budget to do this,
Zack Snyder.
Matt Reeves.
Get Matt Reeves to do it.
Yeah.
Have him finish Batman, and then do a Hellboy
I think
trilogy.
If it actually I don't think he would necessarily do a low budget one.
No, he would need the budget, but this is like
I think he would do good.
Indie director. If I could pick someone big, it would either be him or I think someone who might be better, who probably wouldn't do it, but has done a franchise movie before that Guillermo del Toro almost directed for. I think, because I just rewatched a certain series of movies, the director of Prisoner of Azkaban and a few
Number
other
3.
films, Alfonso Cuarón, Children of Men, Prisoner of Azkaban, Gravity.
Children of Men, yeah, that's a good one.
The man doesn't miss,
What if I told you before 1L came into my head? I was going to say Alfonso Cuarón.
Yeah, I think he'd probably he's the person who I could think who can work with special effects but still present like a very genuinely pure vision for filmmaking. He, besides Del Toro, is probably, if you want something that's like fantasy, but he can go to some of those much more gritty places. That would be a very good choice. And
we'll just take a look at the third Harry Potter. It's the best one of the series by far.
Right.
What he was able to do with that story and, basically tell a real film or real, story that wasn't, something that was going to be all about magic, all about, big budget. It was a contained story that felt like very, very like a small, normal movie. It felt like a normal, I was watching like a normal, any type of film, any drama.
Mm-hmm.
It was so well done, but then had just the Harry Potter aspects of it that made it, real. But the Harry Potter aspects is what kept it, connected with the franchise.
Yeah, he is able. And it's the same continuity. He followed 2 very iconic, very similar movies by a director, and he had his own very, very different vision. So I think he could come in and give us a vision of Hellboy that we can just ignore. We don't even, the other stuff won't even be an issue because it'll be so unique.
Yeah.
The
and
other,
I feel like
oh, go
that's
ahead,
something. Oh, okay. I felt like if they were going to do something like that, he should have been the person that did Hellboy 2019.
Correct. Yeah.
Because he could have came in, told a story that was that was a great story. It would have looked and felt close to Del Toro, but yet feel something that was like totally unique.
Mm-hmm. I know. I think this is probably kaput, but I don't have a source for this, so I apologize. I recall, Shape of Water was kind of like a weird, somewhat Abe Sapien story, like slightly like the most tiniest percentage Hellboy adjacent that Guillermo did, kind of as a consolation prize for not doing Hellboy 3, because the studio kind of said no, and Ron Perlman's old. And Ron Perlman for a while said, like, I don't want to do those prosthetics again. It's a pain. It's not worth the time. Sorry. Like, plus I'm not doing it if Del Toro's not involved. So when 2019 came out, I believe he saw the movie and he was so like put off by it. He legit said like, hey, they could do like old Hellboy with me and Guillermo again. So maybe that's they're doing nostalgic kind of requels. Maybe what you do is you get the band back together and get whoever you can, get Doug Jones and maybe that would be enough to get people back on board Hellboy. I don't know.
Yeah, bring back good old Lobster Johnson.
Mm-hmm. He's the only thing from 2019 to carry over. It's just Thomas Hayden Church.
I love that character just because how ridiculous it was. It was just so like old time pulpy character.
Yeah.
Have our Hellboy No Way Home. Mm-hmm. All the Hellboys coming.
So here's the thing: is that honestly, because Jack Kesy's playing a younger version, if money and perception were not an issue, and let's say like, let's put aside reception, put aside money, like you could have like a simultaneous sharing of the role and just have like David Harbour or Ron Perlman be an older version and Jack Kesy just the younger version. Like there's room for it. It's not like, I don't know.
No, yeah, it's true. Unfortunately, the last two Hellboy films, I believe, are failures.
Yes.
You mean the last three? Because Golden Army was a failure too.
Well, I mean,
I think Golden Army just didn't.
Box office wise, that's what killed it.
Yeah, Golden Army, I believe, was a failure in the same sense that like Amazing Spider-Man 2 was, where like it did make a profit, but it didn't make as much of a profit as they wanted. So
it's too close for them to continue, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a super mega bummer because we would have gotten our Guillermo del Toro trilogy if it was successful. So I don't know what's next for Hellboy though, because it's like
Here's what I'll say.
I don't see like studios actually going for it.
Here's what I'll say. This is what you do. And this is going to save you a lot of money. We look at stuff like Spider-Verse. Hellboy has had 2 animated adaptations, but they were low budget. Get an animation studio to do Hellboy, because I think that would be the best way to capture how that comic looks and feels. You don't have to worry about prosthetics, and you don't have to worry about locations. Have like a Hellboy movie on the level of like a Spider-Verse, but Hellboy. I think that's the route. I think that's what you got to do.
Probably, yeah.
Did you guys also read the trivia? Speaking of Guillermo del Toro, maybe directing the third one, and how now it's definitely not going to happen, is that him and, if I pronounce his name wrong, correct me, Mike Mignola?
I'm not the man. I'll say that.
Sure, I'll take it.
So, when Hellboy 3 got kaput, Guillermo del Toro went to him to try to write the third one into existence to be part of the comics. But Mike said no, because that is not the vision of what the comics are. And so I don't know if this is what made them break their friendship, but supposedly they are no longer friends anymore.
Mm.
So
yeah, I think So just so you know, spoilers for Hellboy 2, but the ending of the movie is so here's something. So the spoilers for Hellboy 2 ending. So just so you know, the Hellboy Liz romance, none of that is in the comics.
Isn't she a child in the comics?
No, she's a young woman, but they're like a brother sister. He does like when they started writing comics after they finished it, like prequel stuff. He had like a romance with someone, but the Liz Sherman Hellboy relationship, which is the heart of the Del Toro movies, is not in the comics. Them having kids is definitely not in the comics. Hellboy never has any children in the comics. I feel like that is the major dissonance there.
Yeah.
That's not the vision that Mike has, and it is the vision Del Toro has.
Yeah.
So.
Because what Del Toro was moving to do seemed like he was taking the Hellboy elements and making his own trilogy with it.
Yes.
He wanted to tell his own Hellboy story.
Mm-hmm.
Which it seems like he had the blessing of Mike in the beginning, but then it soured towards the end after Hellboy 2.
Yeah, Hellboy 2 was the thing that broke. I think Mike liked Hellboy 1 decently, but Hellboy 2 he didn't like, and then Crooked Man's his favorite because it's the most accurate.
Yeah, it's probably because the Golden Army is just like 100% not.
Yeah.
In the comics.
Yeah.
So it's probably just a matter of source material stuff that he didn't like. Too many liberties taken, and then to top it off ends with "I'm pregnant with twins." I could imagine being pretty furious at that in the moment, like seeing that, be like, "What did you do to my baby that is Hellboy?"
Yeah,
I could see that.
Do they quit in the comics as well, or is that a Del Toro decision?
I think so.
So
doesn't Hellboy leave?
That's the funny thing is, like 40% of the way through the main story, he quits the BPRD, and he doesn't rejoin them.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, the majority of the comic is Hellboy like wandering and like going on, like seeing, like there's like large sections of the comics that are him like talking to ghosts and spirits that haven't passed on, and like crossing through these ethereal realms and then investigating stuff and dealing with his destiny. But the BPRD storyline, so there's a spin-off comic that runs parallel with the Hellboy story, and so the BPRD are doing stuff, and like they'll like interact, but like Hellboy is not part of the BPRD for the large majority of the story.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
that's the only thing about the end of Hellboy 2 that is accurate to the comics, is that, well, technically they all quit, but in the comic it's just Hellboy who quits.
So to spin off on that question, if we are lucky to get a follow-up to this Hellboy, and you being a person that's read Hellboy, what story would you like to see next?
Oh, man. I think they had the right idea, doing like one of the short stories. But the first Hellboy arc, which was partially adapted into the first movie, it's been 20 years. Like, I think you can go back, and the first story is not that complicated. It's very simple. The budget wouldn't be that. It would probably be like maybe slightly more than Crooked Man, which is probably too much than what they want to put into it. It would be cool to see them try to go back and start from the beginning and do like a true adaptation, but in my heart, I think, I almost think like what they could do, and this is very radical, just literally go to the end and say, I don't care, we're doing Hellboy in Hell, and it's just Hellboy like at the end of his journey.
Okay.
Because then you have more freedom to kind of, I don't know, tell maybe a tragedy. I would love to see that done by like a very creative filmmaker.
I think that would probably be the move if they were to somehow still go back to Ron Perlman Hellboy.
100%. Just take him and skip to the end of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's older. Do Logan. Essentially just do
Exactly.
Logan, but with Hellboy. That formula works. But as a fan, 2019 was kind of adapting my favorite story, larger story.
The Blood Queen or the...
The Blood Queen is the best story arc in the comics, in my opinion. It's really good, actually.
So now I know even more why you hate it.
Maybe I need to give it another shot. I haven't rewatched it.
Well, that's the thing is I went and rewatched it and I was like, oh, any positive feelings I took away from it the first time are wrong. It is that bad.
I think honestly, like what they might want to do is like do a BPRD or Lobster Johnson storyline, and then just maybe try with something different, and then have him as a bit player. I
really think that, like, obviously, you always hear this with every freaking franchise, but it could work as a HBO Max story series, where you go at it that way, a little bit slower pace because it's a series. And then you get more of that episodic new adventure here and there, blah, blah, blah. And then you can also go back to the BPRD and those characters that you established. You have an abundance of material and possibility for a series. I'm not saying that should be what they do, but I think it is a possibility.
I'll also say it's a beloved series. It's very contained and could be done as one movie. They partially did like elements of it at the beginning of 2019, but do the Hellboy in Mexico comic run as a movie, and even better, do it as an animated movie. That'd be awesome.
Him against a coven of vampires, I'm guessing.
Chupacabras. No.
Chupacabras. Ooh.
Yeah. Well, guys, do we have any closing thoughts on Hellboy the Crooked Man?
What are your rankings of the films? We kind of heard mine. Game of Thrones first, then Crooked Man, then Dead Last.
Yes, I'm the same as you. Golden Army, Hellboy 1 close behind, then Crooked Man, then Hellboy 2019 at the bottom. The animated ones would both be above Crooked Man, though. So that would be the buffer. Is 2, 1, the animated films, Crooked Man, 2019.
What about you, Rick?
Like I said before, the first ones are 1A, 1B. The second one's 3A, 3B.
What do you mean?
In terms of quality, they're exactly the same to me. They're both great, the first two. And then same thing with the last two. In terms of quality, they're okay. They aren't something I'm going to seek out to watch. But if they're on TV, I probably wouldn't not watch them,
Fair.
If I'm not doing anything, throw them on, I'd watch them both again.
I do kind of want to rewatch The Crooked Man, though, which I think is a very good thing for that film.
I do really want to rewatch Effie Cobb, A Crooked Man Story.
I want to rewatch The Crooked Effie Cobb with a bottle of lotion next to my bed, and then I'll be a happy man.
It's my favorite of the series. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, this has been Ripped to Shreds. Thank you all for joining us. Next time we will be talking about something very spooky, probably going into the origins of All Hallows Eve.
Maybe.
Oh.
Or maybe we're going to be talking about Brandon's obsession with Effie Cobb. All right, guys. Until next time.
I'm gonna make my own lore video of Effie Cobb.
Please do. I would love to see that.
And all it is talking about her accent and her legs.
So I haven't read it, but in the comics, she actually does come back for a story. Just saying.
Perfect. Let's get it. Crooked Man 2. Bye.